A very good afternoon to you, and thank you all for joining us today. As I said earlier, it's me, Chris Hall, here, the marketing manager at Charity Digital, and big welcome to you all for another remote webinar day. I really do hope you're all keeping well. I want to kick us off today with by saying a big thank you to all of you who did manage to join us last Thursday for what was not a webinar, but a series of webinars. We actually ran our Be More Digital Leadership Day, and we had hundreds of you join us online to collectively tune in over, I think it was over 60,000 minutes when we looked at it. Tons of sessions and conversations that covered things from strategy, service delivery, culture, and inclusion as well. We have had some really good feedback, and we're starting to use that to plan our very next virtual day, which will be in October. And that's the Be More Digital Fundraising Day. So please do keep an eye out for that. I did also want to give you a quick update about a new initiative that we launched yesterday called Heritage Digital. So we, Charity Digital, have partnered with the Heritage Alliance, Media Trust, and Naomi Cohn Associates to launch a digital skills platform for heritage organisations. The project is backed by the National Lottery Heritage Fund. It's a mouthful. And we'll be running a series of online training, webinars, downloadable guides, and interactive events. So if you're a heritage organisation and looking to learn more about digital, then you can head over to heritage-digital.org to register and start checking out the content. It's a really exciting initiative that we've really been working on hard for a while. So we're looking forward to what that yields. But for today's webinar, we have a great story of resilience, response, and recovery. Now, as we've talked about so often over the last few weeks, while COVID has been troubling and difficult for a lot of organisations, a shining light has really been that so many have had their hand forced when it comes to adopting digital change. And we're seeing a lot of charities come through in a position of strength. One of those charities is 318. They're the only independent Christian safeguarding charity offering organisations a complete safeguard solution. Their culture and drive to be more digital has been key to increasing awareness of the services they provide, advancing their cause, and to set them up to combat the effects of COVID head on. So today we welcome Peter Wright and Claudia Bell from 318 and Alan Peristrello from Trillium to discuss how taking the digital plunge has enabled them to be agile, responsive, and supportive at the most challenging of times. But as always, before I hand over to Trillium and 318, I have to remind you all of the house rules, especially for the newcomers out there. These are all produced remotely, so please do give any forgiveness in the recording and the live stream. If the internet does go out, just please bear with us, and we'll be back up and running straight away. Feel free to continue the chat in the group. That's what it's there for. Get to know each other, ask questions of each other, share stories. We want this to be an interactive experience where you learn, not just from us, but from each other as well. It's critically important to these webinars. So please feel free to be open and have those discussions in the chat. We also will have time at the end for Q&A. So if you want to have us answer a question, you can do so by hitting the Q&A button. It tends to be on the sort of center right at the bottom of your screen at the little pop-up bar next to, but it can move around depending on where you are. It does look like two text boxes overlapped. So if you want to ask a question, hit that, submit, and we'll do our very, very best to get those answered for you. All slides, resources, recording will be available after the session as well. We tend to send them out within an email within a week of 5 days a week of the webinar happens. So you can bank on receiving those very quickly afterwards. Well, that's all from me for now. Without further ado, I'd like to hand over and officially welcome Peter, Claudia, and Alan to the webinar. Welcome, everybody.
Thanks, Chris, and welcome to everybody. It looks like we've got a total at the moment of 76 participants, so thanks very much for joining us. The good news is I'm literally just doing a very basic introduction of Trillium, and then I'm going to hand over to Peter and Claudia, who are really going to tell an amazing story and hopefully provide you all with a little bit of insight and some inspiration of what you can all achieve. We started working with 318 when they used to be known as the Church's Child Protection Advisory Service, or CCPAS, and it's just been really great to see how they've responded and planned and reacted through what really is a digital transformation kind of story. And Peter's going to talk, and Claudia, and talk about how they've used a lot of the lessons they learned through that transformation story to kind of continue transforming in challenging times. So I'm really proud of them as clients. They're such a great story, and just wanted to let them shine. Really basic piece about Trillium. For us, really experience matters, and that's a combination of looking at things like strategy, the digital, the CRM, and how we can integrate those things. And I think that there are elements of all of those things in terms of the work that we've done to support you know, 31.8 in terms of their journey. And really what that basically translates to in terms of how we, you know, use technologies to make those things happen is we're really looking at, you know, what we call these connected engagement solutions. So it's about helping you understand and manage your donors, your fundraisers, your volunteers, whatever it might be, using things like Dynamics, probably much a Microsoft stack there. And then on the Interact side, we use you know, platforms like Umbraco and Sitecore and community platforms like Higher Logic. And then on the Connect side, where we're actually helping you get your message out and use the digital channels, it's kind of .digital, Click Dimensions, the SendGrid, lots of social media in there. But fundamentally, we're also about transacting and helping all of our clients, you know, make those transactions and get those donations in, whether they be via direct debit, whether you regular giving programs, whether you've got anything going. We also work with one of our partners called InstaGive, who do some great stuff in terms of text-based donations. So that's all I really wanted to kind of leave you with on Trillium side, and I wanted to hand over to Peter and to Claudia to tell their story. So thanks very much.
Hello, good afternoon. It's really good to be with you. Thank you to Chris and to Charity Digital for letting us join you this afternoon. It's good to be with you. My name is Peter Wright. I'm Head of Marketing and Communications at the charity 31.8. And we just, myself and my colleague Claudia, who'll be speaking in a minute, we just wanted to share a little bit about some of the things that we've encountered that I'm sure are going to be the same for many charities at this time. It's been really difficult, but also interesting time of trying to work through this period and work out how we continue the services that people rely on from us during. We are an entity. We were established in 1977, so we've been around for about 40 years now, working in areas of child protection and in the safeguarding of adults at risk. And our vision really is to see a world where every child and every adult can feel, but also be safe. So wherever that point of engagement is, that they can do that in a safe way, and they can be places that can learn and can educate, and we can do that safely. So we do that by providing a whole series of safeguarding tools. We do advice, we provide guidance, and the real practical tools that organisations and charities need to create those safer places and to protect vulnerable people from abuse. These are just some of the things that we do in terms of offering support. Most people will be familiar, I think, with DBS checks. So whatever role you are performing, you probably are familiar with the need to have a background check. But then there's also safeguarding training that we provide. So we provide training in a foundation level, both in terms of safeguarding children, young people, and also adults at risk. And we also have various different levels of training that cover things such as supporting trustees in the role of governance when it comes to safeguarding, risk assessments, and a whole range of training that goes along with that. We also have a 24-hour safeguarding helpline that we provide, so anyone can call us and get advice and guidance on issues that range right from how do I write a safeguarding policy, what do I need to include in my training, right through to a disclosure perhaps of abuse, and to get support and advice on how to deal with that effectively. We provide support with policy writing, and we also do a lot of consultancy work with organisations, risk assessments, past case reviews, and we really set ourselves up, and our ambition is to be that one-stop shop for all your safeguarding needs. So that's a little bit about us. We are a Christian charity, so our specialism is working with churches, faith-based organisations and charities, although we're not limited to that. We work with a number of businesses and organisations that come to us for the same type of support. And the way that we operate is that we're a membership body, so organisations, other charities will come into membership with us, we charge an annual membership fee, and organisations can come to us and through that membership get access to our support and to our services. And currently we're supporting over 10,000 organisations across England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. And lastly, we do have an arm where we're looking to work with government. We look to create positive change in the arena of safeguarding, part of which is why we're involved in the setup of the all-party parliamentary group on safeguarding in faith settings. And that was 2 years ago. And we've just recently released some reports looking at positions of trust for working with young people. So a bit about us. Along came COVID. Not many people expect that to happen, but along it came. So how does it affect us? How is our charity affected? Part of the thing that happened first really was our head office in Kent. We had to close that. That's also our UK training centre. So all our offices were closed as part of the COVID pandemic response. A lot of our staff were now working from home. Some have been furloughed. So we've had an impact on our staff. But interestingly, looking at our member organisations and how they've been impacted. So we've seen some that have really been unable to operate. They've been completely shut down, unable to continue doing the work that they've been doing. But then on the other hand, we've seen a huge rise in organisations wanting to do stuff, particularly volunteer work. So when we're thinking about protecting and looking after the most vulnerable in our communities, that work has really seen a massive increase over this period. So the biggest impact that we've seen, as probably with most of you, most other charities, has been our face-to-face work. So our training, our consultancy, and those things that have no longer been feasible because of the impact of the virus.
Peter, sorry to interrupt you. We're just getting a bit of slowdown from the Wi-Fi. As much as we like looking at you, I was just wondering if it would be best just to turn the camera off to see if we get a bit of a better connection. Is that all right?
That's no problem. I will carry on talking. I'm going to hand over actually to my colleague Claudia. So Claudia is our head of learning and influence, and we thought it'd be good to do a bit of a case study on what we've learnt through our training in particular. So Claudia, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Peter. I think you are trailing off a bit there. Thank you. Chris, if I do start to dip in the same way as Peter does, I'm sure you'll tell me and I'll switch my camera off, but I'll have it on for now if that's okay. Super. Is that all right? Yeah, can you hear me okay? All right, so good afternoon, everyone. My name's Claudia and I work for 318. So my role at 318 is my job title is Head of Training, Head of Learning and Influence. And I have the real privilege of heading up a training team that comes from a whole range of backgrounds, professional backgrounds, police, education, social work. I have to strategically to make sure that we deliver a kind of cutting edge training offer for those that use our services. So the impact of COVID-19 for us has been massive. And what you'll see from what we're about to share is that we have developed over the years a training suite of various foundation, advanced specialist courses that meet the needs of various job roles within the charitable sector, from youth workers to children's workers to trustees, a whole range of roles, predominantly within the faith sector. And we deliver around 230 plus courses per year. So for us, hearing that we were going to go into lockdown and couldn't deliver training at all was our first thoughts, if I'm really honest, was probably a state of panic, thinking, what on earth are we going to do? And that's where we found ourselves. And I think, the impact is that it's also one of those things that, so our training sits alongside a range of services that we offer at 318, but it generates about 10% of our income. So we really couldn't afford to just stand still and think, well, we'll just wait it out or we'll sit this one out until it passes, because we didn't know the timescales. None of us knew. We know that the whole country was just put into a state of lockdown, not knowing really how long that was going to be for. So we just had to think about, where do we go from here? What do we do? And we were already in discussions about trialling online platforms, including webinars. We weren't quite there. It was on one of our sort of action plans to do. But I think, as Alan referred to, we were kind of forced to fast track that very quickly. and move into a situation where we had to think about what tools have we got already? Can we do this? Is it possible? What do we need? And so we began to kind of unpack that and think about how can we kind of mobilise and get our team together so that we can continue an offering of some sort. So that's what we did really. And so moving on to the next slide, Peter, if you don't mind, thank you. What digital allowed us to do is a range of things, and it meant that because we were familiar with the digital platforms, we were quite confident in that. We've got an excellent IT team that were able to help us with that. We thought let's just try it. Let's go to webinar, which is the most obvious option. We do have some online training which we're also reviewing and refreshing, but we thought, how can we continue service? And the easiest and quickest way to do that was to move our training to webinar delivery, and our systems are set up such that we already had online platforms so that we can book. We allow people to book through our website in the same way they would have done for face-to-face. There were no issues there. It meant that in essence we really only had a break in our service offer of training for about 2 to 3 weeks, so quite minimal. By all accounts, there was a huge administrative task that sat behind that pause, because in essence we had to ring all of our organisations and individual delegates that were booked into our face-to-face events to be able to say, look, actually this is not happening now, please bear with us until we can find an alternative. And we were speaking to people about those options and would they be interested in an online provision of a webinar or something else. And interestingly, when we spoke to people who were usually engaging in our services in a face-to-face way, what I think we heard was a bit of fear around that. So it was very much kind of, well, we're not sure what it's going to look like. What does that mean for us? We're not familiar with using those platforms. So we'll say no at the minute. We'll wait until things resume to normal service. And we accepted that, and we thought, well, we'll plough along anyway. We'll run a few webinars. Let's see how we go. And interestingly, what that did for us is it generated new business and new clients. So we learned very quickly that those that were booking onto our new webinar, which we launched sort of first week in April, a couple of weeks after lockdown, was that those that were booking into our training sessions online via webinar were new people. They weren't those that were booked into our face-to-face events, and it almost felt as if we were kind of opening up what we offered to a whole different group of people, and therefore in some respects being far more inclusive to people that would not normally access our services. I think in the second session that we did, we had somebody from South Africa or somebody from another country as well. So just broadening our offer and our reach in essence. And we're now 3 months down the line, so we're now just gone into July, and we've ran 40 webinars in that 3-month period from April to June, which for us it's nowhere near what we were delivering face to face. It's not reaching the same amount of delegates, but actually we've done far better than we thought we would. We just thought we'd have a couple here and a couple there in terms of delegates at each event, and I think we're averaging out at the minute about 20-25 people that are attending our events, when our kind of normal sort of average out was probably about 15. So that's increased overall. So that, we're really encouraged by that. Next slide, Peter, if that's okay. Thank you. So just thinking about what were some of our challenges, and I think there are a number of those. And I think if you want to just click through all of those, that would be helpful. Thank you, Peter. So I think we knew that we didn't have the option to stand still, as I said already, because one of the services that we provide is to churches and organisations who run a whole range of kind of social action projects where they're already reaching out to their communities. And given that the situation with COVID-19, there was a need for that even more. So what we saw was an increase in organisations needing to mobilise and they were increasing their volunteer teams. They were actually doing more work than less, and they needed training. It couldn't wait. So we needed to make sure that we thought about how do we do that, and what does that look like for our members. So we started trialling webinars, as I've shared, and we had to fast track that very much so. But one of the key things for us was thinking about what that looks like. So it's very different. And we learned very quickly that, you know, I've got a team of trainers who are excellent trainers who go out and engage with people in that kind of very sociable face-to-face space. And actually that was removed, and having to adapt and a change to speaking to a screen, and the dynamics that sits behind that in terms of all the engagement, that the loss of kind of only seeing half of your body, all of those things were quite key for us. So we had to have a real mindset shift in some respects in terms of what does that look like? How do we create material that is easy to engage with, it's easy on the eye, it's easy to see, that people can connect with, and how did we find a platform where people can still have some engagement, so we can use breakout rooms, that kind of thing. And there are different, I won't say any particular platforms, but there are different platforms which enabled us to do that. And we tried one that didn't work particularly well, so we moved to another. And I think it's feeling confident to be able to move from one to the other. If it's not working for you, then find something else. You know, that's a piece of advice that I would give. And thinking about who you have on your team. And one of the things we had to do really quickly was almost do an internal audit of our skill set and work out who we've got within our teams who would feel comfortable delivering on a digital platform, because it's not for everyone. That's reality. And you need to have people who feel confident speaking to the screen, feel confident with technology dropping out and losing Wi-Fi and everything else, and feeling able to kind of pick themselves back up and get back into that, and being able to, you know, not lose anyone and lose their track of what they're doing and what they're saying. So yeah, the confidence to overcome those IT technology needs, really important, and having a great IT team. We're quite fortunate in 318 that we have an excellent IT team that were able to help and assist us along the way with some of those challenges that we had. So, you know, it's really key that, and if you haven't got that, then that's something you need to think about, or start, you know, and starting small is really, really important as well. So, yeah. Let's just move to the next one, Peter, in terms of what we learned. So, I mean, we learned a range of things, and I think I've already alluded to this already, which is to start small and work your way up. So, you know, we had a range of courses on offer, and we knew that it wasn't possible for us to just throw them all in the pot and start delivering them. A, because we didn't have the resources, i.e. the team, to do that, and B, it just wasn't wise to do that. So we wanted to start with what we knew was safe. So we have a set of courses that fall into our foundation training courses that we knew were tried and tested. We knew they worked. So we started with those. We did an internal trial with staff, and we started slowly. We did 1 a week, and then we moved to 2 a week. So my advice would be to start with whatever you have, and to learn along the way. So for us, what we really value is the feedback that people give us. So we always ask for feedback at the end of a session, and already we have received some really valuable feedback, which has said, you know, this is great, but it would be better if you could do this, or if you could do this, or, you know, whatever way. So we're constantly wanting to learn and take on that advice of what, you know, people are telling us to do, and knowing you know, where your needs are, what your skill set is really important. I think I've alluded to that already, but I think crucially, and this is the most important thing, and I guess, you know, it's important to take away, is that, you know, your organisational culture, I guess that whoever's joining today, you're from a whole different range of charities, big and small, but having an organisational culture that is happy to say, look, do you know what, we'll give it a go. My kind of advice would be to start your journey wherever you're at. We're not there, even at 318, we've worked really hard in the last couple of months, but it's been really long hours, really hard work, sleepless nights, but we have stuck at it. But we're not there yet. We know there are so many things that we still want to do, that we still want to get right, that we still want to make sure it's integrated with our CRM. It's not quite there yet, but we know we can get there. So my advice would be to start wherever you're at, and speak to other organisations that are doing the same thing. So I was quite fortunate to have a conversation just yesterday with an organisation who was saying, look, you know, we want to take our training online, we don't know what to do. Be willing to share your expertise with others, share where you're at, create a forum with people who are local to you, other organisations that work similar to you, and have that conversation. Keep the conversation open, so that you can learn and move forward. So really that is it in a nutshell, which feels like I've whizzed through that, but happy to obviously pick up any questions at the end as part of the panel. that people might want to ask. So yeah, that's my little bit there, but I'll hand back to Peter, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Claudia. I'm going to keep my camera off just to maybe try and make sure the connection stays as stable as I can get it. I think, as Alan spoke about earlier on, the way that we were able to respond during this time of COVID really was as a result of the foundations that we had in place. So although we could never have anticipated this coming along, sort of 2 or 3 years ago, we knew that we had to change, and our ability to adapt at this time really would not have been possible without already, as part of that, we had a 3-year strategy that included a number of things. It wasn't just the technology side of it. So part of our 3-year strategy was a complete internal staff restructure. So we looked at how our different departments were working, what resources we needed to deliver our services. We also looked at our vision. What was it that we were about as a core organisation? We looked at the name of our charity, our branding, and how we really positioned ourselves to be able to achieve the vision that we wanted to achieve. And then the third part of that was looking at an investment in our systems, and particularly looking at around digital. So it was because of that foundational work that we had done, sort of 18 months previous to this, that meant we were able to respond in the way that we did. So what was it we were trying to achieve? I think that was the question we had to ask ourselves. We knew we had to change, but change into what? What were we trying to do? What were we trying to achieve? And the thing for us really was, we wanted to help more people. That really was our passion as a charity. We wanted to see community groups, charities, churches, organisations that are working with children, with vulnerable adults, creating those places that were safe and where people could interact safely, both the users of their services, but also the staff. And that was really our passion, was how can we get the message and the tools and the resources that we're producing out to more people. And digital really had to play a major part in that. And another part of it really was for us wanting to adapt to meet the changing needs and the expectations of our members. So as our members were increasingly engaging with digital, expecting to be able to book training, engage with services, ask questions, respond in a digital way, that was their expectations were really increasing in that area. And so we realized quite quickly that if we were to change, we had to change to meet those increased expectations. And then the other area really was about improving access. So people being able to get access to our training, get access to our resources, and to really increase that level of access for people. A third thing we really wanted to do was to automate our processes as much as possible. So a lot of safeguarding is around process, and being able to automate those processes. For instance, just one example is like the renewal of training. So people have to undergo their training. We recommend they do that every 3 years. So actually being able to automate that process of reminder, renewal, booking, was really important. And of course, the fourth thing was around GDPR. So that came up, and having to make sure that our data was all in a single place that gave us a single source of information, because like many charities, many organisations, we found that we had little pots of data, little silos of information that were being used across the organisation. We had our member database with our member organisations, but we weren't able to tell how many of those were engaging with training, for instance. So being able to have one single source of data for our organisation was really, really important. But throughout that process, there were a number of hurdles that we had to overcome. One of them I mentioned just then was we had these multiple historical systems holding data that didn't talk to each other. And that was one of the primary problems, was trying to solve this issue of having data in different places in systems that weren't communicating. The second one was that our website required our team of IT staff with coding knowledge and skills to make any changes. It wasn't mobile responsive, so it meant that even changing any text, changing any images, adding a new training course, adding anything that we were doing required a really high level of technical skill and competence. And of course, our team.
We seem to have lost Peter for the most part now. Claudia, do you happen to know what he was about to say?
Yeah, so I think our experience 31 is that we had we had multiple data systems. So we had some quite archaic even database systems that didn't necessarily all talk to each other, and we had different servers, different sets of information sit in all different places. So the need to kind of merge that and bring it together was one of the key kind of tasks for us, and that's taken an incredible amount of time, but needs to, because we need to get it right. What we don't want to do is kind of migrate and transfer data that actually then we're still stuck with the same problem. I think the thing around our website was very similar, and just needing to have a team that was able to make those changes and to obviously implement those, oversee that. There's been so many testing and trials and bug fixing, but that's all part and parcel. And I think it's right. I think sometimes there's a frustration that that's taking so long, but actually it's necessary to get it right, rather than just rushing and then having to kind of try and unpack something once it's gone live on our website or whatever it might be. So, you know, just taking those things into consideration. I think one of the things that, just looking at what Peter's got on here, in the complex safeguarding legislative environment and operational processes. I think Peter you alluded to earlier that safeguarding is a complex matter, and the issues around confidentiality, how we store that, how we're engaging with some of our clients, and for want of a better description, our members who hold quite sensitive information and data. We just want to make sure that we've got tight enough processes that actually look after that. And there's confidence in what we do, how we hold that data. And I think one of the challenges and the hurdles, I guess, is that particularly we've got a cross-section of staff that have been around for a long time, and having to kind of enable everyone to be on the same page and move on from that statement that I think Peter's got there. We've always done it this way. And I think having that culture, again, I think I talked about it in my section, to be able to say, well, actually, we've always done it that way, but does that work for us now? It may have worked then. Does it work for us now? What can we do to enhance and make things far more efficient? And I think in the longer term, when people start to see that things are more efficient, people get it. And I think my experience is, I don't know what Peter was going to say, but my experience is you have to ride that through sometimes, and trust that when we get to that end result of it working well, people being able to access and do things in a quicker way, the way that they want to, and it makes sense, then people are quite grateful for that. So yeah, I think that's helpful. And the need for specialist external expertise. What we're really good at, I think, at 31 is recognising that, you know, this is what we can do well, this is what we can't do, and feeling okay about saying we need to outsource that. We need to find somebody else who has expertise in this area. Let's ask them to help us. So very, you know, our relationship with Trillium very much is about that. They know what they're doing, and they can help us to get where we want to go. There's no way we could do so much of what we do now by ourselves without actually enlisting the help of others that have the expertise that we don't have internally. So yeah. Peter, are you there to take over, or?
I am here, but I don't know if people can hear me.
Oh, right, okay, we can hear
really
you.
Sorry.
And I don't know whether I'm doing
one of the realities of working online.
I don't know whether I'm doing them justice. I'm not in your brain. You're doing a great job.
You carry on.
You go ahead.
Do take over if I disappear again, though.
Yeah, we'll do.
It was just to share with you some of the things that we learned from the process, which I hope might be helpful for you, whatever stage you're at, whether you're just starting out, whether you're just thinking about launching a project, or whether you're partway through. So just share some of the things that we've learned on that journey. The first one really was that your sector is changing. Whatever that is, your sector is changing and you need to change too. And that was certainly our experience, is that we were getting along, we were getting new business, but we really knew that as things changes, we needed to change with it. I mean, COVID is just one example of how quickly overnight the sector that you're working in can completely shift. And it might be a rather dramatic example, but it's just one example of how things can come along and totally upset the balance of where you are. So just to recognise that and to continue to look at how can we evolve, how can we keep in step with the changes that we're seeing in the sector that we're operating in. Secondly, it's being really clear on what you're trying to achieve. And sometimes if you think about launching into digital or launching into any kind of area, it can be quite daunting to think about what it is that you need to achieve and what it is you're trying to do. There's so many different options, different platforms, different software to choose, and it can be quite daunting. But being really clear from the start on what it is you're trying to do. Are you trying to engage more with your support base? Are you trying to raise more funds? Are you trying to unite your data together? What is it you're actually wanting to achieve as your end goal? And thirdly, I guess for us, again, it's really important to see it as an investment, not just an expenditure. And that's some of the battle, I guess, that charities can experience, particularly with the Board of Trustees and trying to get some money to do these projects is actually being seen as, well, you're just spending money on something. But what we had to really realise as an organisation was, no, this was an investment in the future growth and development of the charity. So investing in our branding, investing in our staff, investing in our systems and platforms was actually an investment to grow. And I think it's really important if we can get a sense of that within an organisation, that is what we're doing. We're investing, we're not just spending. And as Claudia touched on earlier, being prepared to challenge the status quo. And for us, it's asking why. So as our charity grew, we came in to it. I came into it quite new. I've only been with the charity 3 years, 4, I think. And it's that asking why, why do we do it this way? Why does it have to be done this way? Why do we use this platform? Why do we use this system? Why do these people do this? And I mean, that can get a bit grating, a bit annoying, but asking those questions why helps you boil down to that, what is it we're trying to achieve and how can we change things to make it better? And asking yourselves the question, what will happen if we don't do anything? If we leave this the way it is, if we leave this system in place, if we leave these processes as they are, will anything happen? What will be the end result? So asking those questions. And as Claudia mentioned earlier, that developing an internal culture that embraces change and embraces new ways of working. So for us, we were quite fortunate in that we'd done several major changes as an organisation. So we'd done the staff structural rechange, we had done the rebranding work, and so the new systems that we were implementing was just part of a culture of wanting to develop and grow and change the way we do things. But that's particularly, I guess, the role of leadership. That's why managers and leaders are there, to help create that culture of engaging with new things and looking at new ways of doing things. So I apologize if I was talking quite quickly. Just wanted to keep my voice on there before we cut out again. Hope that was helpful for you.
Amazing. Thank you both very much. And I think, connection issues aside, there was some really, really strong messages in there. So thank you very much. I'd like to invite you all three of you back now for the Q&A. We do have questions starting to flood in. If you do, like I said earlier, if you do want to submit a question, please feel free to hit that Q&A button. Looks like two text boxes overlap, and it could be on the bottom of your screen. If you're on a desktop, if you're on a mobile, it can tend to be in the top right if you're struggling to find it. But do please keep them coming in. We're going to be spending the next 20 minutes or so going through them. There was a lot of takeaways from that, Claudia, and a lot of really good ones. And it's really good to hear a lot of your success stories, a lot of your success as well that you've had from digital adoption. And I don't know if you were paying much attention to the chat to that as well, but we've had some great stories come through on there as well. We had Louise from Orchard Trust, who has sort of matched her annual fundraising initiatives with the virtual summer fair. It sounds really extensive, and some amazing plannings went into it. Linda from the National Churches Trust also has raised, hundreds of pounds for an afternoon tea party, and Paul from Pontefract Civil Society as well has built a model to promote community activities and help them raise a lot of money as well. So it's really empowering for us to see, and I'm sure you as well, that charities are adopting well. And kind of looking back more at your story, off the back of what you've learned and all those challenges that you found, how has this thrust into digital narrative kind of prepared you for the future? Do you think you'll be stronger? What happens if, how do you think you'll fare if COVID 2.0, dare I say it, comes back to haunt us?
I'll lead on. I think that should another challenge, one that we don't know. I think, I have complete faith in the team at 31.8 that they'll be able to respond to these challenges. And so many people now, and I think I was saying this in a webinar kind of 2 weeks ago, the reality is, and you can see it in the chat, that so much has actually been achieved in a very short period of time because you all had to. Now, some of you have done it elegantly. Some of you have done it, with whatever tools you had. But I think that the lessons learned of the past, 3-4 months is that change can happen, and it can happen fast, go really fast if you have no choice. I think with the lessons learned from the kind of, the 31.8 story is that they'd already started the kind of cultural change. And all the things that I think that the guys have said, the thing that really strikes me about it, having been through the journey with them, is that they started on the culture piece. Yes, they recognized the systems needed to change, but the digital thing is not just a new website or a new CRM or a new marketing platform. It's about getting that culture right. And I think it's safe to say that the team realized they didn't necessarily have the right culture to take that challenge on board. But full kudos to the joint CEOs at 31.8 is they realized that that's where they had to start. Now, in hindsight, they had the luxury of time. But I really think it's put them in a really good stead so that when the next challenge comes, whether it's digital or whatever, they'll just knuckle down with the knowledge that they've done it already and they've got that confidence.
Absolutely. No, I think great point, Alan. Very well answered. Thanks very much. And on culture, then we've had a question in the Q&A of, what are the sort of key tips, for getting people behind digital, for change, and for really making that change within your organisation at the human level? What did you do at 31.8, Claudia and Peter?
I think for us, in terms of the training and my experience of that, and some of our trainers who just are probably still struggling to get their heads around how they do that. They're so used to seeing and engaging with people that we've had to, I think it is a culture thing again, actually, Alan, in terms of what you're saying, in terms of taking time to listen to what people's anxieties are and to hear those, and then to think about, well, how can we support them to do that? So we've done a lot of hand-holding and coaching and allowing people to sit through a webinar, see how it's done, and actually that's allayed a lot of fears, and we've allowed them to sit and observe as many times as they need to until they feel confident. So we're not forcing anybody to do anything that they feel uncomfortable, because that would just be completely wrong and unhelpful. So it is allowing people, it's listening to what their anxieties are and allowing them to kind of trial it. And if they genuinely don't feel happy doing it, I think we have to accept that and think, well, okay, face-to-face will come back at some point. But I think what we're also adopting, and I think going back to your first point, on the back of what Alan was sharing, is just around, if we find ourselves in the situation again in 6 months, a year's time, this digital platform that we're using isn't going to go away. We've accepted this now as kind of almost a hybrid model of, we'll always have this now that will sit alongside our face-to-face engagement with our members. So we will grow in confidence and experience over time, hopefully.
Great. Peter, have you got anything to add to that?
I think for us, it's also sort of proving that it works can be quite difficult. But if you can do that on a very small scale, if you can change a few small things and actually prove how that operates and the returns you get from that, can be quite a powerful argument for encouraging people to engage. And I think one of the other things is also looking at other examples of change within your organisation. How can you learn from that? How can you find people in your organisation who are willing to try new things? You don't have to be in that leadership role. It could be anyone throughout the organisation who can take that initiative to try and to move things forward. Great,
thanks. Alan, anything to add?
Sorry, I was on mute. No, I think the guys have, they've illustrated. I think they've, the proof is in the pudding, really. The engagement that they're getting on all the courses, the general sort of, get it done attitude is there. Everyone's just getting done. So I don't think I could add anything strange.
There's a first. Well, congratulate yourselves on that, Claudia and Peter. Awesome. So I'll head back over the Q&A. Some great questions coming in, and thanks for submitting them. One from Paul here. So how is Thirtyone converted digitally excluded people who would usually attend the face-to-face training, or even those who are, who use technology but might have the fear of attending a webinar or something online?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think there is some reality to the fact that it may well have, and I guess exclusion probably is sound like quite a harsh word, doesn't it? But I just wonder whether it has suspended interaction for some, and I think that's a reality. And I think that we may not be able to get away from that. I think we know who those people are, so we know those. So we had quite a tight process of who was already engaged or wanting to attend our face-to-face training. We know who they are, so we know if they haven't come back, if they're not sort of utilising our kind of digital kind of webinar platforms. And what's interesting is that those, I think I said it earlier, is that those who that were sort of shying away from that for all sorts of reasons are now coming round, because as time has gone on, the necessity has almost kicked in above kind of, I can't do that, or I'm afraid, or whatever the reason might be. But I think the reality is there will be people who are sitting it out and waiting until face-to-face comes back. And I think it's just making sure that we don't lose sight of who they are, that if they genuinely can't access it or have tried and don't want to, then we'll have an offer for them at some point. But I think it's also, we've utilised the expertise of our IT team. So where people have struggled, we've had them on the other end of the phone, getting them into webinars and actually making sure that the information that we give them for sign up is really clear, and making it that one-click join, making those things just really easy to do.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, and digital exclusion is something. It's obviously it's something we really need to consider quite substantially. But it's a little bit like cybersecurity in the sense where with everything going online now, you realize where the gaps are, and I think it's making those continuous, those promises almost to address and look through them. This is something we've just started to talk about as well as an organization that promotes the use of digital throughout charities, and especially even as we've been on the journey alongside other charities through the digital transition. We're not way out ahead of anybody else. We're right in the weeds, and it's something we've noticed as well and started to pick on. We just released an article about it today, for example. So we kind of are finding out these little things that with fuller, more extensive changes to a digital world, there's going to be things that crop up that need addressing. I mentioned cybersecurity because what we're also seeing, and we ran a podcast on this 2-3 weeks ago now, that one of the things that happens, you've come through one risk when it comes to you've survived through COVID and you've got yourself set up digitally, but now you're opening yourself up to a whole new world of cyber criminality, which is something you've got to address as well. And I think digital exclusion is something we have to work through from a service delivery point of view to make sure everybody's included, especially those who don't have smartphones, don't have access to the internet 24/7, that sort of thing. So it's a continuous wheel of improvement and trying to make things fully inclusive, essentially. So moving on to the next question, Claudia, you mentioned how you're using webinars for training. We have a question here of any tips on best days, time of the day to host webinars to maximize engagement?
Yeah, I think the benefit of everyone being at home, including the team, those who are delivering training, means that we can vary that. So we used to, as a rule, offer training during the weekdays and on Saturdays, but we have, since doing webinars, started delivering those in the evenings as well. Just because we've got the flexibility to do that, because people aren't having to travel. So I think that, the simple answer is be as flexible as you can. If you can do it in evenings, mornings, afternoons, weekends, we already do training on weekends, and we're delivering our webinars at weekends, then the more you can offer, the better, the greater kind of engagement you're going to get. And I think we have seen better engagement in the evenings, actually. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's kind of working around your audience a little bit, isn't it? And we actually do that to a degree as well. Our webinars are always 1 o'clock on a Thursday, every other Thursday, to build in that sort of routine. But one thing we're seeing a lot at the minute is speak to your audience, speak to your service users, see when their availability is, and then let them determine when you put on these training sessions, which sounds like you've done at Thirtyone with being able to make accessible evening sessions, which has boosted engagement. So I think it's going to be different for every organisation in that sense. In talking to charities and talking to service users is probably the best way to find out when you're more likely to get your engagement. Peter, Alan, anything to add to that?
Nothing to add. I think you can do with polls and things. You can quite quickly get a sense of what your what your users are wanting. You can particularly starting off with if you've got a core base of members or supporters who are engaging with you regularly, you can just pick up the phone in some instances. Pick up phone, email them, email 5 or 10, and get a very quick gauge on what sort of times will be best. Because it's going to be different for different audiences, isn't it? So it's knowing your audience and what they need. I think is really key to that.
Yeah, I think that what it probably does illustrate is not a bad, very small, simple piece of work to undertake, is to actually ask, your donors, your audience, your volunteers, whoever they might be, is ask them via, various channels, are they digitally excluded? And I think you'd find that the percentages of people that come back and say they are probably fairly low. The method you conduct the survey obviously needs to be as digitally agnostic as possible. So don't forget, maybe paper for those people who you think might be, kind of on the digitally excluded schedule. I think of a few topics where I know anecdotally of some other people whose work colleagues have never owned a PC before COVID-19, and in one case used to go to the library to send emails. That person now has a laptop and they're being supported. So I think that there are people out there who will be digitally excluded, but I think that this is probably going to be a change, and I think that collectively a lot of lobbying will happen at a government level to support people who are excluded for whatever reason, financially, connectivity, location. And I think that will continue to change, and this will be one of the good things, the very few good things to come out of COVID-19, that will probably accelerate a more democratically digital society. Just a thought.
Good one. Thank you, Alan. Appreciate that. Sorry, I thought you were going to add something there. No worries. Great. Thanks very much for that. So we have next question coming. I'm kind of going to push together here. We talked about digital culture buy-in. Another question has been asked. There's some charities, whether it's from internal or externally, kind of it touches on the exclusion a little bit as well. Is how can you cover strong objections to digital from those who are 60 plus, for example? How can you combat that within the workplace? Is this something you experienced at 31A?
I'm assuming kind of from your support base. I think what I was trying to allude to in the slides that we covered really was, for us, we found that is what our support base was wanting. It wasn't that we were trying to push something on them that they didn't already want. We were responding to people's expectations, and I think people they expect to book a holiday online, do their shopping online. Their expectations of how they can engage is dramatically increasing, and as Alan was saying, lots of people are becoming far more familiar with it, and they've had to in this last couple of weeks and months. So I don't think we had a huge amount of opposition. I think people, as our support base, certainly welcomed it. I guess if you're talking internally, you're going to have a range of staff who, some for them they're really okay with it and they get on with it and they expect it. Other people do need that extra support. So I think it's acknowledging that not everyone is the same, and making sure that as you roll it out, as you approach it, as you seek to get feedback about how to roll these things out, how to implement them, that you are making sure that you're including in that process a variety of voices. So you're not, when you mention digital, you don't get a lot of people who love digital and therefore are racing forward with it. You're making sure that you're taking the time to really ask people, a range of people, how they're going to engage, what they want, what they need, because it needs to come back from a very clear vision of what you're trying to achieve. And for us, it always has to be, we want more people to create safer places. So how do we do that? How do we help people do that? And in some instances, it might be that digital might not be a part of that, but it's acknowledging that we need to deliver what we need to deliver in a way that is most appropriate for the people that are accessing it. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, it was great. Thanks. Anything to add, anybody?
No, all good.
Cracking, thanks very much. So last question from Georgia Horn, and you know, throughout your presentation you did you mentioned some of the challenges, but she says from, you know, they're thinking about this at her organization, you know, where do you start with digital strategy, and you know, what was the biggest challenge you faced out of those number of ones that you mentioned? Claudia, do you want to take this one first?
Just to mute yourself. Yeah, I mean, wow, so it's a big question, isn't it? And, you know, where do we start? I think you have to start where you're at and with what you've got, and also recognizing the team that you have. And I think if you don't, you know, we operate in that. So my actual employed team at 318 within my department is a team of 3 or 4, including myself. So we're incredibly small, but our reach is really massive. And obviously we have a team of self-employed trainers as well, and self-employed staff that we can draw from. But given the COVID-19 experience, we had to be quite internal in terms of how do we get this started. And so I think for me, it's about being prepared to have those honest discussions about how people are feeling. I think, and it goes back to the culture in terms of giving people a space to talk about their anxieties. Actually, this is going to be massive. Can we achieve it? And then dividing that into small chunks of what's achievable, and starting there. It probably sounds kind of quite idealistic, but actually there is something about just being really clear about what you think you can do. Like what's the kind of what I kind of describe as the low-hanging fruit. What can we do right now that's really easy, really simple to do? We don't have to use our brain too much to do. And actually, where do we want to be? What do we want it to look like in the long term? And how let's just set our plan to do that. And it may be that we have to then grow the team and go bigger, but let's just start with what we've got. Yeah, and try it, and don't be afraid. And the thing is, the reality is, you might get it wrong. We had a you know, real life experience where we were using a particular platform and it went wrong right at the beginning. We had to transfer to a whole different platform mid-flow of a course, and then we learned that actually the wisest thing to have done actually was to have said, actually, we won't do this now, let's reschedule, but we didn't, and we got that one wrong. So being able to have a culture that it's okay to get it wrong, make mistakes, and start again.
Yeah, I'm a fan of that phrase as well, a low-hanging fruit one. But it's very true. Be brave, test, iterate, isn't it? That's kind of what it's all about, and learn as you go. Peter, Alan, anything to add?
I would probably just echo what Claudia's saying. I think, you know, to err is human, and the fear of making mistakes stops us from just doing so many things. But just getting on and getting it done, and recognizing, so what, you'll make some mistakes. As long as you are prepared to make mistakes, you'll be prepared to fix them. And I think, you know, that it goes back to the culture that 318 created at the start. You know, they created a culture that realized they were going to change, and change sometimes works the way you plan and sometimes doesn't. You know, so the team probably just reacted to that situation, you know, like they do with most things, you know, shrug of the shoulder, all right, not great, and get on with it, you know. Lessons learned.
Great.
Anything, last words from you, Peter?
Last wise words. No, I think it's just, I think we're all discovering that this whole period of COVID has actually really helped people's understanding of digital, and to help them see the real need and value in it, not just now, but going forwards. And I think I'm hopeful that actually those kind of barriers to getting digital mentioned and getting digital people to engage with it are actually going to be a lot less, that people will be far more open, because they've seen the potential, they've seen what can be done with it, even in the maybe not very, you know, what we're doing now, it's not highly, you know, the cameras are dropping out and stuff, but it's kind of, people are a lot more accepting that we can do stuff with it. It doesn't have to be perfect, as long as the messages are getting across effectively.
Great finish, very strong. Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you. Thanks, Claudia. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Alan. Thanks to 318 and Trillium as well. Another great webinar. Really appreciate you taking the time out to join us today. And of course, thank you to all of you at home, or wherever your remote office is, for joining us today. As I did mention throughout the resources, slides and recording will all be available after today. We'll be sending them out via an email in the next week or so. Also, if you would be so kind, please take a second to drop us some feedback. You should get a survey tomorrow that will ask just a few questions, a couple of minutes, just fill in. We're always looking to improve our webinar process, as we kind of just talked about. It's all about testing and iterating. Our next webinar is in 2 weeks' time, and it's with yours truly. So the table's been turned. I'll be on the other side of the microphone, and we'll be presenting a webinar on fighting crisis with content, all about how you can go about making yourself more visible from a content perspective during a period of saturation from the content and communication point of view. And we also have a podcast. Our weekly podcast is still going strong. The next one is with Blackboard and the status of UK fundraising. So make sure you have us you are subscribed to us on your usual podcast provider. That's it. Big thank you. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to our esteemed guests, and we'll see you all next time. Stay safe.